All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for waiting for us. Hot Mic Crew is back. I'm Nathan Ivy, your humble host and moderator. And as always, I'm not alone. I'm joined by the crew. Today we got Lincoln Ware with us. We got Phil Heimlich, and of course, my homie in this endeavor, Kevin Aldrich. How is everybody? Welcome back.
I just finished throwing up after that debate last night and the poor performance by Governor Walz. So I think I'm recovered and I'm able to now communicate.
Okay.
I thought he did a pretty good job myself. I mean,
Lincoln,
I thought he did okay.
Yeah. Lincoln, all I can say is whoever prepared him, they need to be out on the street. They need the blue. What do they call it? The pig slip. That's what they need.
I mean, I will admit.
Who are we talking about? Are we talking about Walz or J.D. Vance?
Oh, I'm saying Walz was horrible and horribly prepared. And it was like he had softballs coming across the plate and he whiffed on them. Okay. And I'll be happy to go into detail, but this was our introduction here. And so I don't want to monopolize everything.
Well, I'll tell you what, let me play a few clips of what happened last night, and then I definitely want to get your opinion. And then while we're doing that, Phil, something just happened with your videos, like you're underwater.
I know. I see that. Are you guys trying to tell me something?
Not at all. But I'll let you work on that, and I'm going to play a clip.
What am I if I can ask, what am I supposed to do? Because
moisture on your camera, Phil, that's what it looks like to me. Maybe you got a little moisture or something on the camera lens.
Yeah, that's exactly what it looks like.
You talking about on the screen itself?
Yeah.
Lens, the camera lens.
Crap!
I want to. While Phil's doing that, while Phil
look at the top middle. Look at the top middle of your computer console.
While Phil's doing that, I want to play what I think is, to me, stood out as one of the most interesting and poignant points of last night's debate. I want to get your opinion about who won, who lost, high points, low points. Do you think it'll have an impact on the overall election? But first, I want to play this clip for you. Check this out.
Tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret? Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Look at that. Look.
Dentists hate when you do this, but they
here we go with the Facebook ads. But hold on one second, guys. All right. Yeah, so the gist of it was Tim Walz and J.D. Vance were asked a question near this, one of the last questions about, would you certify the election? And actually, J.D. Vance was asked that question. And instead of just answering straight on, he started talking about how Kamala Harris had censored people. And I thought at that moment, he lost it for me. But let me give you my thoughts overall. I thought that J.D. Vance came across as strong. I thought that Tim Walz came across early on as if he was a bit nervous. And, as I was watching it, and we all know this, not everybody is sort of built for debates. It seemed as if J.D. Vance was very smooth and he seemed very comfortable. I would even go so far to say that he controlled most of it until the very end. But what do you guys think?
Well, let me say this. When he didn't answer some of the questions that was asked of him, that's where he lost me. It was about 3 or 4 questions that he was asked directly, and he went off on something else before he would even attempt to answer the questions. So he lost some points with me on that. But like
who did, Lincoln? Which one are you talking about?
J.D. Vance lost points with me on that, and I agree with him. He was very smooth. I thought he looked comfortable, more comfortable than Walz did. Walz looked like a deer caught in headlights in the beginning. His eyes were wide open, but he got comfortable as the debate went on. But I thought Vance was very smooth, and you could almost call the whole debate a draw with Vance losing points for not answering questions.
Yeah, I kind of feel like Vance helped himself last night. There's no question about that. I mean, when you look at how he had been perceived, how unfavorably he had been perceived prior to this coming in, I think he presented himself well enough last night to where he looked like your sort of standard smooth politician. I mean, look, when you compare his debate performance to Donald Trump's, one of the things that J.D. Vance has to his advantage is he can actually put vocabulary and common sense sentences together to try to articulate policy points, whether you agree with them or not. I mean, I still think he told a bunch of untruths. You know, he showed his hand when he was asked a question about the certifying the election and all of that. So you still, even as smooth and polished as J.D. Vance was, you still got some of the same stuff that you've always gotten for him. It was just packaged a little bit better. And look, the guy's a Yale graduate. He's an Ivy League guy, so he's going to present well. And he looked better than, the school teacher, Tim Walz. We know these debates, a lot of it is stagecraft and performance over policy. And if you're looking at it from that standpoint, there's no question that J.D. Vance outperformed Walz. But if you're paying attention to the substance of the conversation, of the policies, I don't think there was a question there that I think Tim Walz did better in that. He just didn't come across. I thought a particularly bad moment for Tim Walz last night, though, aside from the shaky start, was when he was asked about the discrepancy in his military service record. And I thought he did an awful job of trying to answer that. Well, he didn't even really answer it in the beginning. And then when he was challenged about it again, he kind of gave the mealy mouth response that I thought just really didn't engender any sense of confidence in folks. If you were trying to judge him on that, I thought that was probably his worst moment of the night. But I don't think it moved the needle much for folks one way or the other. I mean, it's the vice presidential debate. What people are really focused on is the candidates. And I think the job of both of those gentlemen last night was to do no harm to their candidate. I don't believe they did. And I don't think either one particularly helped their candidate either.
I had a kind of a consultant in pretty high up Washington, DC consultant when I was in office, when I had to do a debate, that kind of thing. And she said something to me that always stuck out. She said, you don't need to answer the question. You don't need to counter attack. When they say something, you got to go after your opponent's weak spot. That's what you have to do. And you talk about missed opportunities. Tim Walz, he could have talked about the cat lady stuff. He could the worst of on Jen, he let Vance say that Donald Trump accepted the peaceful transfer of power on January 20th. Are you kidding me? All you got to say is, oh, sure he did, after he incited a violent attack and after he tried to put his vice president at risk. What he should have done is make a little joke and say, I think maybe, Mr. Vance, you better keep an eye behind you because your predecessor almost lost his life because of that. He could have torn the guy up with that. He could have talked about the pressure that Trump put on state officials, on the Justice Department, and on Pence. He sits there and allows these opportunities to go to not attack there. And so, yeah, maybe neither hurt themselves that much, but there was a golden opportunity for Tim Walz after all the stupid comments that Vance has made over the years. He did nothing to use those comments against him.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of good points there, and I think that it was clear to me that Tim Walz was sticking to the script. Whatever debate prep he went through, or whatever coaching he was given to that, you could tell because he was constantly looking down at his notes, looking for talking points. JD Vance was much more relaxed, and I don't even believe he was reading from any notes. If he did, it wasn't apparent by the way that he came off. So I think that Tim Walz was given some directives. He was coached up, and he was so focused on sticking to the script that he had been given that he really wasn't kind of allowed to be himself. And anybody who's ever had to try to follow a script, if you're more worried about that, you're not going to be able to freestyle. You're not going to be able to sort of be nimble and respond to sort of what your opponent is saying and kind of counterpunch in that situation. You're so worried about sticking to the script, and that's what I felt Tim Walz was doing last night.
And compare Walz's performance to Kamala Harris, where I mean, she was so well prepared and just so on top of her game. I mean, this guy, he just looked like a guy who just didn't know what he was doing, wasn't well prepared. And really, if Trump wins this election, you can never point to one thing or the other, but I'll tell you, if it's a close one and Trump wins, a lot of us are going to have a lot of regrets about how this thing turned out, because it did allow Vance to kind of rehabilitate himself and, in a sense, provide some positive, sort of easy description of the whole Trump agenda. Instead of it being seen as menacing and a threat to democracy, he was able to make it seem more regular. No, civil, exactly.
He should have gone after him on the Haitian with the cats and the dogs. He should have eaten him up on that, and he did let him off the hook. It's like your boxer having somebody on the ropes, and you hit him a couple of times, and then he just backed off and let him off the ropes on that one.
Exactly.
Here's what I think.
I don't even think he put him on the ropes, to the point that Phil made. I mean, as I was watching it, I thought, and that's a good way of putting it, Phil, a lot of missed opportunities. I didn't see him turning it back on JD Vance when there were so many opportunities that he could have done that. And I think it's to what Kevin said. I don't think, some of the media were saying that it was obvious that Walz wasn't prepared. I don't think that's the issue. There's no way that man in that situation walks on that stage without a lot of preparation, but it was the delivery of it. I think he was afraid of making mistakes and trying to remember his lines and, okay, what they tell me to say. You could see his wheels spinning, while JD Vance looked like he was smooth sailing. And he was a real smooth sailing liar to me. I wouldn't trust JD Vance with an 11,000 foot pole. I wouldn't hire him to wash my car. He couldn't do anything for me because I can see through that. But that's me. A lot of people are going to look at the surface stuff, body language, who seem more comfortable. I would even go so far as to say I thought JD Vance was more articulate in communicating his points. And I thought he did a really good job of puffing up Donald Trump, which is what his job was supposed to be. Right. At every opportunity, he turned it back on, hey, things were great under Trump. Now, we all know at least I know things weren't good under Trump. But he, in that moment, I thought did a good job of making his running mate look as good as possible.
And Nathan, if I can just say that he supposedly, we're now hearing or heard yesterday that he's not a good debater, or he told her, I'm not a good debater. Well, you guys are all in communications, and I think you all know, as I do, that even somebody who's not real good at this, if you take enough time, you do enough rehearsals, you can take almost anybody and make them have the ability to be somewhat articulate. And as I said before, whoever prepared Tim Walz ought to be out of a job.
Well, I think it's easier. I think Phil, I don't necessarily agree with that 100%. I mean, look, this is a huge stage. I think a stage that Tim Walz has never been on before. And I think he struck me as sort of like the backup quarterback that gets sent into the game and is told, hey, don't lose the game, right? Just don't manage the offense. Just do what you need to do. Just don't lose us the game. Whereas JD Vance, you know, they literally have nothing to lose, right? It's like
Right.
JD Vance was comfortable. He was like a boxer who was kind of in his element, who was never being challenged. I wouldn't say he was more articulate than Tim Walz. He was just smoother. Walz had good content there, but he was just rough with it. His delivery wasn't good. He was not as polished as JD Vance is. And we know that kind of thing matters as much. Like I said, JD Vance was a smooth liar last night. We didn't see or hear anything differently from him. He was just able to package it incredibly well. And I think, you know, what I think Tim Walz got lulled into, because I found myself getting lulled into this a little bit. We live in such a divisive, corrosive political environment, right? Where people just cannot talk without things getting heated and uncivil. This reminded a lot of people of how debates used to look, where candidates actually talked about policy, where they weren't talking over each other, where there wasn't a ton of nasty name calling and this, that, or the other. And it's easy to get sucked into that and start feeling really good. Like, man, this reminds me of what politics used to be like, what debates used to be like. And I think Tim Walz fell for that a little bit last night and did not do enough to counter the misinformation and false truths that JD Vance was there. Because I found myself as a viewer doing that. Like, man, this is great. They're actually really kind of talking about policy here a little bit. The only problem is JD Vance was doing what they've always done. He just dressed it up a little bit.
And you know, Walz is used to this locker room type speech that he does, you know, trying to fire up the football team. And he was taken out of that element last night.
Yeah.
And he couldn't perform. He couldn't perform as well as he would do if he's trying to hype up a team to take on a big game to go out there on the field and get them fired up. And that's when he's most comfortable. A setting like this, he's not comfortable at all.
Yeah, definitely could translate it. I went to Fox News' YouTube channel because I had to know what the Fox News people had to say, and they had a good time last night. They were so happy, high-fiving, chest bumping. You know, they're doing all kind of happy dances because they felt like JD did a good job. And they're right. He did a decent job for himself. Like, I am convinced that this is all about JD Vance. Like, all the things that JD Vance said about Donald Trump, I think he still believes them, but he's an opportunist.
Yeah.
And he sees himself as like the crown prince, the next in line for the MAGA kingdom. And last night, if that was his intention, he did an excellent job of setting himself up to be the next, leader of MAGA. But Laura Ingraham said, quote, that any doubts about JD Vance should be put to rest. You agree with that?
No, I don't, for exactly the thing that you just said, that JD Vance is an opportunist. If JD Vance had remained the JD Vance that he was, the guy who was telling the truth about who Donald Trump was prior to that, and presented himself as sort of like a regular Republican as we sort of know it, and not a MAGA Republican, he would have a very bright future. He may yet still, depending on how this election turns out, if MAGA winds up winning, I think he is next in line. But I've always felt like JD Vance had the chops and the abilities to be a politician. It's just, a lot of people didn't know him. He's getting a lot of exposure now as vice president, even being the author of Hillbilly Elegy. Not everybody had read that book. Not everybody had seen the movie. So he was still widely unknown by a lot of people, not so much anymore. So I think that prior to his transformation, that was going to be the big hill that he had to overcome. He's making the gamble that, an opportunist like that makes, is that, hey, I see which way the winds are going right now, and I believe this is the way it's going. So I'm going to say what I need to say, do what I need to do. I don't believe he believes most of the stuff that he's saying. I think he's saying what he needs to say to advance himself.
Right. And you're right. And I don't even think Trump, even if he wins the election, which I hope he doesn't, but if he wins, I don't even see him completing the 4 years.
I disagree with that, Lincoln. I agree with Bill Maher. Bill Maher, if you remember, prior to 2020, said Trump will never leave. Trump will never leave. And in effect, that's what he tried to do. And I agree with you. Yeah, Vance may see himself as the heir apparent, but believe me, if Trump wins, I would not be at all shocked if he stays in the presidency through one way or the other, whether violently or by just compromising some kind of law or pushing through a constitutional, whatever it takes. Yeah, I have no confidence that Donald Trump is, even if he wins, is actually going to leave in 4 years.
You know what I
My
was
only
thinking?
challenge on that, Phil, would be, and me being a man of faith, I always say, you can never move the Almighty out of the issue. And I would also say Father Time is undefeated. So if Donald Trump chooses to go that route, the man's 78 years old. He's not going to live. He's got less time on the clock than we might think. And if you
He's not
think
going to be a Jimmy Carter. He's not
if you
going to be a
think
Jimmy
Joe
Carter.
Biden is too old, this cat's got, if he wins, he's got 4 years. I think that's about it before age and senility catch up with him.
You know what happens? You know what happens though with dictators? Like somehow the old Saturday Night Live, Francisco Franco is still dead. I mean, it's like they often will have a son, or I wouldn't surprise me at all if he's in there. Okay, after 4 years, he's got to get out. He's got to get out. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he pushed Vance out of the way and said, I think Don Jr. is the right man for this, and just carry on the family dynasty.
Yeah, I don't, you know what? I hear a lot of that, and I hear a lot of that from Democrats, but I also just tend to think that some of that is overblown. I mean, yes, sure, Trump has stressed and he's challenged a lot of our institutions, but I just don't think America is that far gone yet where they're going to go, where they're going to go for that. I think Democrats tend to overplay their hand a little bit by overplaying that to some degree. Definitely he's a concern. Definitely he can do a lot of damage. I'm not suggesting that, but I think this notion that he can make himself king for life in America, I just don't believe that.
Just think about 2020. You take away Brad Raffensperger, Mike Pence, and a couple of Justice Department officials, and guess what? Donald Trump probably would be in the White House right now.
In the White House right now.
So I say I believe it was hanging on a thread in 2020, and if Trump wins and now it's 2028, I don't care how people vote. He will find a way to manipulate things for him or his successor to stay in power.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, just to back up what Phil said there, I mean, if not for 3 or 4 brave men,
brave Republicans,
3 or 4 in a nation of hundreds of millions, Donald Trump had a good chance of being the president right now. And there wouldn't be a damn thing that anybody could have done anything about it. That's just would have happened. So I don't know if that's underplayed. I mean, sometimes you got to call a spade and see it for what it really is. And I
guess I just believe more in the institutions and the people in the institutions than, maybe a lot of people do. And I just think that, when you start going down that path, then you start talking about seriously disrupting this country that we have, because people are not going to sit still for that. I mean, if you think that Trump is just going to be able to get that off and people are just going to sit and take that, that's not going to happen in this country.
Yeah, but the Republican Party has said
I don't think the military would have allowed it. I don't think he had that much control over the military to let.
Yeah, I mean, you're
I
seriously.
think Trump had a lot more support
if you're
in
talking
a lot
about
of places that people just are underplaying. I mean, Trump has a lot of support.
Yeah,
but
Nathan, there's a lot of people who are kind of like sleeper cells right now.
Trump has a lot of support, but he only has like 40% of the country. Let's not forget that the majority of Americans don't want Donald Trump to be president. If this was a popular vote, he only has a chance because of the Electoral College. If this was popular vote, Donald Trump would never.
But it's not popular vote.
No, but here's the point that I'm making behind that, Phil, which is why I say I don't think it'll ever happen. When you've got 50 plus, almost 60% of the country that doesn't want somebody in, do you think that those 60% of the people are just going to sit back and take it?
Yeah.
If this man tries to usurp power?
You look through history, dictators don't come to power with 60% support. They come to power with maybe 30 or 40%, and whether through violence, whether through fraud, locking up their opponents, whatever it is, they take power. Throughout history, demagogues have taken power without having majority support.
I have more confidence in the American people to say Because what you're talking about is civil war. You're talking. It will come to violence. It will come to revolution if it comes to that.
But think
And
about
I just
it,
don't think America.
What about
I just don't
Hungary?
think America
Okay,
is
let's
ready
take
for that.
how it would've
Hungary.
played
There's
Let's
no
take
way
Hungary
you
for
can tell me. There's no way you can tell me Americans are going to sit back and
All right,
take that.
let me give an example.
well,
Let's take
Americans are
Hungary.
sitting back and taking it right now. I mean, think about it. If those 3 or 4 men, Mike Pence, Raffensperger down in Georgia, if they had went the way of Trump, if you follow this logically, it would have went to the Supreme Court. That's Trump's Supreme Court. They would have rubber stamped it. We already saw this back in, what was it, 2000 with the hanging chads, when the
Yeah.
Supreme Court basically gave the election to Bush and nobody did anything about it. That can't happen because most people are afraid. They don't want no smoke. They don't want no violence. They just want to do what they do.
Or they're
They are not
apathetic.
going in these streets to do anything if they think it's
I
going
tell
to be
you
violence
what,
out there.
we
You
have a
know
different
why? Because they
mindset
haven't been
now.
forced to, Nathan. But what you're talking about here, you guys are talking about a hypothetical situation that's unlike anything we've encountered since
It
the
Not
already
unlike
happened.
anything. It's just like 2020.
It already happened in 2000 with the hanging chads down in Florida. The
We have a
Supreme
different-
Court essentially gave the presidency to George Bush.
And there was no pushback.
And there was no pushback
mindset
whatsoever.
now. It can
And the
happen.
same
again.
thing would have
I
happened.
think what you're talking about in terms of deciding an election that was controversial. Look, I mean, we can say that with the hanging chads and everything in that election, that Bush had as much of a claim to the presidency as Al Gore did, right? I mean, that's the whole point. If you're just looking at the election totals, Gore lost that election by the vote counts in the Electoral College. It basically came down to a handful of counties in a particular state that we were talking about. And the process, if you look at the process that we follow, the reason why Americans took it was because the process worked. It may not have worked the way Democrats wanted. It may not have worked the way that people wanted it
And
to.
Kevin, that's the same rationale that would have been used 4 years ago.
No.
It's the exact
Because he-
same
because
rationale.
he lost.
They would have said,
No,
they
because
would
he
have
lost,
said that
Nathan.
the process
He
works because
lost
the
in
process
look,
goes through the
Donald
Supreme
Trump
Court.
lost in a landslide. He lost in a landslide. It wasn't like, that's the mistake. That's a false equivalency.
It is not a
2020
false
was
equivalency
not like
at all.
2001. Donald Trump lost the Electoral College badly. Is that not
Well,
facts? I mean, is
Well,
that not
guys,
facts still?
guys, if you allow me, let's take an example, which I think is very pertinent. I'm sure you know that the world leader that Donald Trump constantly holds up is Viktor Orban, right? He talks about him all the time. In other words, this is the guy that he models himself after. Okay, what's happened in Hungary over the last 10 years? Well, guess what? They elected democratically Viktor Orban, and Viktor Orban slowly started shutting down the media, locking up his opponents, and that country is now a dictatorship, the one that Trump looks up to, and Tucker Carlson as well. So, and there was no civil war there. They just turned it around from a democracy to a dictatorship, and I don't see any reason if Trump wins that can't happen here.
And
Well,
it's kind of
you
like
go back
the
to
fraud.
2000.
Go ahead, Lincoln.
If you go back to 2000, both candidates were no one was president. You know, we had the president leaving, right? And so there was no one there to really put up a fight. That's why no one said anything about the hanging chads or anything like that, because both were running for president. None was a sitting president. Neither one of them were sitting presidents. That's why you didn't hear any pushback. But today you would hear some type of pushback for sure.
All right. There was a question from the audience. Michael writes, he was intimidated by Vance. I think he's speaking of Walls. He didn't want to make personal attacks. He avoided the counters. That seem about right to you guys? Is that why Walls wasn't more aggressive and
I wouldn't
attacking
necessarily
Vance
agree
more?
that he was intimidated by Vance. I don't think that at all. Like I said, my sense was that I think he was given some instructions that he tried to stick to the T, and I think he got lulled into. I think Vance did a very good job of lulling him into this comfort zone of where he felt like, hey, this is just a normal debate. Hey, doesn't this feel nice? You know, that we're and I think he fell for that. I don't think it was as much intimidation.
I agree.
Maybe as it was nerves or just just falling into this this rhythm that he fell into last night, even to the point where, you know, they wound up kind of agreeing with each other. The one thing that Vance did better than him was, even when Vance agreed with something that Tim Walz said, he would pivot quickly and go to his attack of Kamala Harris.
Mm-hmm.
Tim Walz didn't do that as deftly as Vance.
Right. Definitely not. Yeah.
Well, let's move on, guys. Good conversation. We may come back to it sometime in the near future. But let's talk about Pete Rose, the all-time hit king in Major League Baseball, Cincinnatian. Everyone knows him, and of course knows the saga around him. He passed away yesterday. It was announced, and immediately the conversation about whether he should be inducted into the Hall of Fame burst on the scene again. You've got current players on Twitter saying that Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame. I've got a lot of people on my timeline saying the same thing. And Pete Rose he voluntarily accepted the ban to baseball. And initially, of course, he tried to get reinstated afterwards, which never happened. But I want to get the opinion of the crew. Should Pete Rose be inducted into the Hall of Fame posthumously?
I think he should be. I think the way baseball and football are set up now, gambling is part of their everyday life now. So look, he gambled, when it was illegal to do that on baseball, and it's still illegal for players to do it, players and managers do. But I'm saying they're being hypocritical if they try to keep him out at this point in time on gambling. So yes, he should go in. He is the greatest. I mean, he's the hit king. And I don't think anybody will ever break his record. So put him in there and let's move on.
Well, let me ask you a question. I actually don't know the answer. Is O.J. Simpson in the NFL Hall of Fame?
No.
I believe
Is he?
I think OJ is a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I think he is.
Let's put it this way.
Is he?
I think no matter how great he was, and he was as a running back, I think if the incident involving him had occurred prior to his election, or even after his death, whatever, I don't think he'd be a likely candidate. Now,
But he was found not guilty. So
look, I don't even want to get into that as a former prosecutor. I don't want to get into that. But I doubt if he hadn't been in the Hall of Fame and he just passed, I don't think there'd be a groundswell to put him in. Now, granted, is what he did versus Rose worse? But the fact of the matter is, whether he's alive or dead, what he did was beyond the pale, absolutely beyond the pale. Betting while his team on his own team. I mean, this kind of stuff. And keep in mind, guys, just a second. Keep in mind that he also, you remember, went to prison for tax fraud too. You'll remember. So it's not like he had just one little spurt in his life where he just went the wrong way. This guy had a history of just terrible choices, and if you're and frankly, those terrible choices, he needs to be held accountable for them, whether he's alive or not. That's my opinion.
Well, to me, look, you go into the Hall of Fame on what you do on the field, your records, the home runs.
So you think O.J. Simpson? What about O.J. Simpson? Would you
put all that stuff aside? You can't deny him what he did on the field.
Yeah, I would agree with Lincoln to a certain extent. I think the Hall of Fame is about what you do on the field, but because let's just face it, in all of the sports, there are a lot of guys who are not great individuals, who are not great people, who are in halls of fame. Let's just be honest. Let's just be honest about that. Not every athlete who's in a Hall of Fame in their respective sport is like Sportsman of the Year. Okay, so let's just stop pretending there. Where I do think it does make a difference in terms of Pete Rose is, and I get where things are now with baseball and football and sports in general with gambling, but we got to look at where things were at the time that it happened. Pete Rose violated, one of the major tenets that you cannot violate in sports. Because the only thing that it takes to derail sports in general is for the fans to think that the fix is in. Yeah. The minute fans start to think that this is not legitimate, your sport is done. And Pete Rose introduced that when he bet on baseball. It doesn't matter he didn't bet on the Reds. He violated that tenet that put into question the legitimacy of the sport. And I think that matters because it has to do with the sport. If this was just like, oh, his infidelity issues or father and kids outside, personal stuff, I would agree. And I would say, hey, that's not a reason to keep a guy out of the Hall of Fame. But Pete Rose violated one of the major tenets at that time of baseball and the integrity of the sport. So I think you got to pay for that.
Yeah, and I believe actually even
let me
today
finish,
with
Phil, and then
legalized
I'll let
gambling,
you-
he couldn't do what he did bet, and he did bet on his team. Okay, I think that was established. But
bet on
even
them to
today,
win.
not against them, not against them.
I'm going to address that in a second because Faye Vincent had a good quote.
But can I finish my point first, Phil?
All right.
Can I
I'm sorry.
Can I finish
Go
my
ahead.
point first?
Please,
Here's what I
please.
was going to say. But here's why it doesn't matter, though. Here's why I think it doesn't matter at this point whether Pete gets into the Hall of Fame or not. I think for most folks, if you don't get into the Hall of Fame when you're alive, when you can stand at that podium, when you can accept the adulation for your career accomplishments, it just simply doesn't mean as much. Yes, your family members can step up there and take that honor, but the Hall of Fame is intended for the players, and you hope that they're able to enjoy that honor while they're alive. That ship has sailed for Pete Rose. It'll never happen. The other reason why I don't think it matters at this point is because Pete Rose, his hits record, as Lincoln said, I believe is one of those sports records that will never be broken. I think people just don't appreciate how monumental and how difficult what Pete Rose did was. And for that reason alone, he is going to live on in fame in Major League Baseball for as long as that record stands, regardless of whether he's in the Hall of Fame or not. Pete Rose is going to be somebody that they're going to be talking about from now on until that record is broken, which it may never be. And so that's going to stand, and that's something Major League Baseball can never take away.
Yeah. And just to follow up a quick point, Faye Vincent, who I believe was the commissioner who imposed the punishment on him, was quoted today or yesterday in the media when Pete Rose responds, "I never bet against my team." Okay, well, he pointed out that if you don't bet every game, which he did not, that what happens if you start putting a starting pitcher in a game and versus saving him for another game, perhaps that you're betting on. So that the fact that if it's even true that he didn't bet against his team, I don't think it means that much.
I think that people forget that Pete Rose initially voluntarily accepted the suspension. So that says something. Like he must have known that he was dirty or he was wrong on some level. So that's got to be a part of it.
But he lied about it for years too.
And then he lied about it afterward and wrote a book about it titled My Prison Without Bars. But all great points. I got a friend named Dave Zirin, who's a hell of an author, and he writes about the intersection of sports and politics and sports and culture. He wrote an interesting piece about this, and his take was slightly different. His take is that there should be more of an appreciation for gambling as an addiction, and that perhaps Pete Rose was a gambling addict. And then he sort of connected that to what's happening now with this explosion in gambling, whether it's Major League Baseball, all the major sports. And it's very interesting and very compelling, but not enough to make me think that Pete Rose needs to be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, look, sometimes, you have rules, they have to be set in stone, and this is one of those. I would love for Pete Rose to be in the Hall of Fame. I think in terms of what he did on the field and what he meant to the game, he definitely deserves it. But he broke a rule, a cardinal sin, and it is what it is. For all the fans out there that are belly aching and butt hurt and upset about it, there's only one person to blame, and that's Pete Rose.
Well,
Pete Rose did this to Pete Rose, and I feel that he deserves to be there, but at this point, it is what it is. However, Major League Baseball and these other major sports need to be called out for this new marriage when it comes to gambling. Because for years and years and years, they avowed it. It was like, they wanted nothing to do with it, but now they found a way to make money out of it, and it's all good now, at least in terms of for the fans.
And maybe if Pete Rose had an addiction, now every time you see a commercial, they got this 1-800 number, gambling problems, call this number. So if he had
in small print, I might add.
Well, still, I think if he had an addiction, then they should look at it like, hey, he had a disease. Let's reevaluate this.
So here's why. Here's only why I challenge that a little bit is, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't be sensitive to addictions that people have, But again, Pete knew the rules. He knew the rules. Like there was no equivocation about what the rules are. And if you suffer from an issue, from an addiction, something you can't avoid, you should seek help. Like Pete had every opportunity. Like that's the thing that you can't, excuse him from, is his accountability in the issue. There are a lot of people who suffer from addictions who take accountability and they seek the help that they need. Pete never once tried or even indicated that he was interested in doing that. So you got to take accountability for that. Going back to something Nathan said, his accepting the voluntary ban. Look, Pete Rose didn't do anything that was never self-serving for Pete Rose, right? He made the calculation. He was going to get banned anyway. I think he probably thought in some level or had gotten some sort of counseling that says, hey, maybe if you fall on the sword and voluntarily do it, that keeps the window open for you to come back, as opposed to if Major League Baseball has to throw the book at you, then you're probably done. I think that was the counsel that Rose probably got. I don't think we should look at that as, he was being altruistic or truly remorseful for what he had done. I think that was a purely self-serving move, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, and Faye Vincent's quote today. Faye Vincent's
feel sorry for him. I thought he'll wait the commissioners out to see if he could get a break.
Mm-hmm.
Faye Vincent made a very good point in this article I was reading. Again, he was the commissioner at the time. He said, if Pete Rose had admitted his wrong instead of lying about it for years, Faye Vincent is saying he might have definitely allowed him to go into the Hall of Fame. But it's just like in a court situation. We all know that when somebody shows remorse, kind of a bit like Kevin was saying, but shows remorse, I'm sorry I did it, I'm sorry people I hurt, that influences the sentence as it should. He lied about this for years and years. So I think Faye Vincent's point is well taken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that stuck to me as well. I mean, it was never any contrition, never any admission of guilt, just for years and years and years. And to Lincoln points, that's probably what he's trying to do. He's trying to outlive the commissioner, hoping that a sympathetic person would come in and that he might be able to get in. And it just didn't work out for him. So again, if you're mad about Pete Rose not being in the Hall of Fame, there's only one person to blame, and that's Pete Rose. Let's move on. Let's talk about this new piece that my buddy Kevin wrote. I just got to take you to task on this, Kevin. And then here it comes, buddy. But I would recommend that everybody. I think this is actually the wrong one. This is another piece. Let me put the right one up there. But just so, and I don't know if I said this to you publicly or privately, but I'll say it publicly. I think very highly of Kevin's mental. I think he's a hell of a writer. And I think this is a very well-written piece. I just take exceptions to parts of it, not all of it, because I don't think anybody really can. So the piece that Kevin wrote it's an opinion piece. Parents of unruly teens must step up to help police schools with youth violence. I thought you covered all the bases. I thought that, you tried to see it from a lot of different sides. But ultimately you came back to the point that, listen, this falls back on the parents. And I did have some issues with it. The first issue I had with it, Kevin, is that I thought it was a truism. Like, we all know that parents are responsible for their children. We all know that. And nothing's ever going to change that. And this case is no different. But I think there's some other factors and some other things that could have and deserve a bit more of attention and focus on, rather than just blaming the parents. Because, I've been living in Cincinnati and been hearing the same thing over and over again. And a lot of these conversations go back to, where is the parents? And it just stops. There's no place else for the conversation to go. But I think in particular, as we're talking about the frustrations that CPD, that Cincinnati Police Department, and CPS School Board are having, really come down to another factor, which I made on another episode, which is money. And I think it's much easier to blame the parents than it is to blame the community and blame the fact that we have a lot of misplaced priorities and we're not really invested in these children. We didn't invest in their parents. And so now we're reaping, we're reaping the not so benefits of all of that. And that was my take. Anybody else want to jump in?
Yeah, I'd like to disagree with both of you fine gentlemen, if I may. I think, and this is, I think you are both subscribing to what I would call the midnight basketball or the root causes arguments when it comes to crime. And when I was on city council, I fought this the whole time. People, the fact is, yeah, whether it's the parents or whether it's the poverty, whatever it is, okay, maybe those are causes, but guess what? We're not going to do anything about those. We're not going to change that. And so my attitude, this is my consistent position when I was on city council, is I believe in this case, I believe in tough policing. I don't believe putting up more rec centers is going to change anything. That, oh, they always say, oh, well, these kids don't have enough to do. That's a lot of BS. Okay, more rec centers, midnight basketball leagues, or whatever root causes you want to bring up. I don't buy it. Okay, at least if it's a cause, it's not. You're not going to change it. I believe that the police. I can tell you this: ever since that agreement that I voted and opposed, I think was it year 2001, the so-called collaborative agreement everybody bragged about. Well, guess what? If you look at the violent crime rate over the last couple of years, it's gotten much worse in this city. And so I happen to be a believer in things like stop and frisk. I happen to believe in those kind of tougher measures if you are going to at least control some of this crime. Because I don't care what kind of, and I'm, as you know, a former prosecutor, I don't care what kind of environment, difficult environment you grew up in. People, and I know this, people do recognize that jail door slamming on you. Everybody recognizes that. And in my humble opinion, unless you are tougher, if you don't have tougher law enforcement, root causes are not going to make a difference. You're just going to have continued crime.
You can't police your way out of this.
I believe you can do something to reduce it. You can do a lot more with it than any of these root causes things.
I believe, though, it starts in the home, and every parent should be responsible for their children when they're in the home and when they're outside of the home.
Yeah, but Lincoln, how do we affect that? Yeah, okay, great. Are we going to send social workers into every home in the city of Cincinnati? Maybe it is the parents. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, Lincoln, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, it's something you can do about it if parents take more of a responsibility toward their children. I mean, it's some of these kids are running the households, So
how are you going to change that, Lincoln? I understand. How are you, or how's the government, or how's anybody going to change that? Again, do you want to send social workers into every family in the city of Cincinnati? What are you going to do to change that? You can't change it.
Parenting courses. When before they send you home with the baby, give you some parenting courses or something. But a lot of these parents, they don't know how to parent. I agree that, but they are.
And there's nothing you're going to be able to do to teach them to parent, to get them to parent. That's the bottom line.
I don't necessarily believe in what everything that Phil is saying. Here's what I would say: is all of you have and are expressing pieces to the puzzle that are important. If you look at the nature of sort of the underlying message of the piece that I wrote, is that I believe absolutely in the truism that it does take a village to raise a child. And that's in a variety of different ways. And sometimes that is with tough discipline and enforcement, which you hope comes from the home. But if it's necessary, may have to come from the police. I'm not saying that is not part of the formula that we have to do. But if our goal is to try to be preventative, right, to keep it from the point of where police have to get involved, then we do have to look at, the parents have to be a part of the solution. I think what frustrated me about it, Nathan, you said it's a truism, but it's a truism that we're not working on, right? It's like we want to figure out all of these ways to cover up for bad parenting without actually saying, well, maybe if we looked at more ways to create better parents through whatever that is creating more affordable housing, having better livable wages so people are in better positions, having good drug intervention programs and things of that nature to help people who are struggling. Look, my dad was a school teacher for 32 years, right? He did things as a teacher back then that, most teachers today probably wouldn't do. If a kid didn't show up to school that was in his class, you know what my dad did after school? He went to that kid's house and he went in and he talked to their parents and he sat down with the parents. And I can't tell you how many kids' lives, how many situations that he changed. My dad is probably one of the most remembered teachers in the history of the city of Middletown because he went directly into the homes of the students, the parents of his students, and he talked to those parents and he found out what they needed. And he helped those parents. He didn't talk down to them. He heard their story and he tried to figure out, how can I make you better? And that made a difference. So I'm not going to subscribe to Phil's philosophy, right? Phil, I love you, but I'm not going to subscribe
Phil,
to
you tripping.
philosophy.
Kevin, how can you do this to me?
There's
How
nothing
can
that
you
we can
disagree with
do.
it? We've been friends
That
for
type
years.
of attitude is exactly the thing that keeps us from making the progress.
I know,
that we
stop
need.
and frisk and all
But
that. He's ready.
Right,
to
yeah, Phil, you tripping. You tripping.
Vortex,
But you know,
Operation
Kevin-
Vortex and all.
Kevin,
Hey, I'm
your
talking about
father
something you can do
nowadays-
that will actually have an impact. With all due respect for you quote root causes guys. That's what, and I dealt with this with every member of city council. I was the only one who disagreed with this. Yeah, the root causes. There's root causes, but here's the problem: you just can't do anything about it. You really can't. It never changes. You can't do it. But at least when you have tough law enforcement, then you know, and you have tough law enforcement. At least you actually can get a handle on it. You can reduce it.
But it's
you really
not,
can.
Phil.
You can do
but
something.
we've already got tough law enforcement.
Yeah, well, think about that. Think about what you're just saying. We're still talking about this as a problem, and we've had tough law enforcement. We hire more.
Look at
police
different
officers.
periods.
We make laws tougher, and we're still
it's not
talking
the
about
laws.
these same challenges. So, Phil, when does it kick in? When does it kick in that it
I'll tell you
says that more police officers and more enforcement does not necessarily change the behavior or get the
No,
results?
it does.
Not at
I'll
all.
give an example. I'll give you some
All it does
examples.
is-
Look at New York City. If you look at cities, but for example, in New York City, if you look at the crime difference between what's his name, the rich guy who followed Giuliani. I'm sorry, Mayor of New York.
Yeah, I know you're talking about. I see his
Bloomberg.
face in my mind's eye.
Bloomberg.
Bloomberg.
You look at Bloomberg was very, even though he was liberal on other things, he was very tough about stuff like stop and frisk and forget the court stuff and all. He was a big on those kind of tactics, stop and frisk. And then you go to De Blasio, who truly undermined the cops, and you see the crime shot up. So to answer your question, your points, guys, yeah, if you look at different cities and you compare the leadership in those cities, whether they believe in tough policing or they believe in sort of handcuffing the cops, you will see a difference in crime.
Yeah, but you know, when the Cincinnati police chief recently, I think it was last week, did a presentation before the school board, she started by saying that crime is down. Crime is down. The mayor has said that crime is down in the city. This is a blip on the radar screen. So that's not even an issue, Phil.
But again, I think it's all in what you believe is the best preventive measures. If you believe that the best preventive measures are arresting people, throwing them in jail, putting them into a system where even if they get out, you've reduced their chances of being, productive citizens, and then they have children, and you just keep perpetuating a cycle. If you think that's the best way to solve the problem, then God bless you. It hasn't worked. It hasn't worked anywhere in this country to any effective degree. I think if we're serious about trying to be preventative, I think police action is reactionary. It's not preventative. Police come in when something has already happened, and they attempt to try to clean up the mess. What we're talking about here are preventative steps. So we're trying to keep kids out of the system.
Yeah,
right?
see, I'm not talking preventative. I'm talking about what is going to reduce crime. I don't care if it's preventative. I don't care if it's reactionary. Okay. And all I would say, guys, is in study, look at crime rates in different cities where you go from I would call them more liberal hands off to a more of a tougher policing, or vice versa. And you will see that crime is influenced by what kind of leadership you have in the city. And again, I don't care if it's called reactionary. All I care about is reducing the crime rate. If you're a citizen, whether it's you living over the Rhine, you live in Hyde Park, I don't care where you live. Frankly, you don't care if it's preventive or reactionary. You just want less crime.
Look, these kids nowadays, they fight in front of the police. They the police are right there and they're still fighting. So I don't know if that's going to work. Kevin, your father had a great idea back then. Nowadays, I don't think he could go into somebody's home,
No.
and the teachers nowadays wouldn't do that. He might get cussed out or something. But
He could. Nah, see, nah.
What?
He-
What?
A teacher could go into a home today, just like a teacher could go into a home back in the day. It depends on whose door you knocking on.
Yeah, this is
Because
exactly
back in the
right.
day, if you knocked on the wrong door, you was gonna get some heat. It's no different today. That goes back to the point I have, the issue I have with Kevin's. It's a broad brush that you're painting all parents with. I just don't think it's fair.
No,
It's a
if you
broad
if
brush that
you
you're
if you
painting
look
all
at the
parents
headline,
with,
Nathan, I was
and
very
just don't
specific.
think
I
that
didn't
it's
say all
fair.
kids. I
Let
said
me finish. I know I'm wrong. I know I'm wrong, Kevin. Let me get it out.
I said
So
unruly
at some point you write that you sort of echo what Fiji said when she was like, well, we shouldn't be the only ones down here, and that parents need to step up. And I'm like, well, how do you know what's going on in the home? So for instance, I was brought up in a household where my parents wasn't on none of that, but I still did stuff. I still stole some stuff, which was absolutely 180 degrees after what they told me.
But
Why
what,
do you assume
what
that just
happened after
because
that
the kid
happened,
is
though?
doing something in the streets that the parents are rubber stamping it?
No, no.
Sometimes kids do stuff that's the opposite of what they're taught.
Okay, Nathan, but check this. So you're making my point 100%. So when you went out there and you did that and you messed up, did you have to answer to that to your parents?
Yeah, when they
Okay,
knew
and
about it.
what was your response after you had to answer for what? Again, I'm
But
not
see, now
saying
you're making my point, and my point is you don't know what's happening in those households. You're not there.
precisely. So Nathan, here's what I'm saying. What I can tell is something is missing in the formula. If you have that correction, and because I know when I did stuff and I got checked by my parents at home, guess what Kevin wasn't doing again? That
When
same
they
thing.
found out about it, your
That same
parents don't
thing
know
that got
everything
him
you
in
did,
trouble.
Kevin.
Now, if I did, knowing how my parents roll, you know what that would say? That would say that there's something wrong with me up here, or my relationship with my parents is not what it should be. And then that's another layer of help, counseling,
Kevin,
maybe mental health, something.
Kevin, you
eventually
are
that I
not
need.
going to tell me that your parents know everything you did in these streets, everything you did.
I'm
I
not
don't
saying
believe
that,
it.
Nathan. If you read what I said in the piece, it may not have stopped me from thinking about misbehaving or even misbehaving, but what it did do is it made me think twice, because I recognized that if I went out there and I got caught, I knew I didn't want to have to go back home and deal with that.
That's
But
most
it's not
people's
enough of
homes.
that. These
Right.
kids don't fear their parents.
and
like
so
You don't
did.
know what these kids fear with their parents because you're not in the home. You're
And
making
precisely-
assumptions.
and
You're making
precisely this-
assumptions. Let me get on just real quick. You're
Okay.
making assumptions based off what we see. You don't know what you don't know.
And this
You
is what
don't
I'm
know.
saying. And Nathan, this is what I'm saying in the piece. Let's find out by engaging the parents of these kids. Let's try to find out what's going on at the home. Let the parents explain to us that if you're struggling with your kid and they're not listening to you, what other services or things that are available to help you as a parent. We want to give you help if you're struggling. That's
You put
the
that in
point.
there.
It's
You
like,
covered
let's
your bases.
find out. Let's find out what's going on in these homes. Let's engage these parents, because if they are disciplining their kids and their kids are doing the same thing over and over again, then it's clear that parent needs some help in some way, shape, or form that other people in the community may be able to wrap their arms around and help that family. That's what I'm trying to say.
Again, you covered your bases well. You're very good at what you do. I did read that. But the overall point that you were trying to make was blame the parents, blame the parents. I'm like, you don't know. Some of these parents don't know what their kids is doing out here. Just like my parents didn't know everything I was doing, and your parents didn't know everything you were doing. Sometimes kids do that. That's what teenagers do. They don't always follow what you say. In a lot of cases, you might tell them something, they go do the exact opposite because they run around their friends. There's a lot of factors that come into this. The parent is just one of them. And one of the biggest factors is our misplaced priorities. We got a bloated police budget that dwarfs, and the CRC budget is dwarfed by the police budget. Why aren't we having a conversation about making investment in after school programs? Why are we not kind of conversation? Because this comes back to money. This is a
What
money
are
here's
after
what I
school
would say,
programs
Nate.
going to do about crime? Is this the argument, the usual argument? Oh, if we just put more a recreation program, just quote, these kids have nothing to do. That's
Well,
not a bull.
studies
They have
show.
nothing to do.
But
Yeah,
here's
They've
the,
got a
here's
lot to
the
do.
studies show, Phil, that most school-aged kids, when they get into trouble, they get in trouble when? After school.
yeah. But
After
here,
school.
Nathan, here's where I would push back on that a little bit, and I
I
think
love
that
the pushback.
this is where I think some of the fallacy of that argument is that what you're presenting is almost being presented as if these things don't exist. And if you talk to some of the people who are on the ground, and like that's where I get it. Like a lot of the opinions that I write, I don't write like out of school. Like I talk to people who are in the trenches, who are dealing with this, and what they say is there are a lot of alternatives out there for kids in the city of Cincinnati that
They are
already
not properly
exist.
funded.
There are, but there's the very real reality that there are some kids that are not going to go to that, Nathan. That there are kids who are going to want to hang out at Government Square,
But we have not
rather than go
funded.
to the after school program because Government Square is where it's popping, and that's where
Always.
they think that it's popping.
Always,
so-
but
so
I don't
that's
think
what
we
they
should
gotta
have
hang
on
this
those bus
conversation.
passes. They need to have a shut-off time on those bus passes to make these kids, hey, look, I don't know how I'm going to get home. I need to get out of here.
And they do. It's
Lincoln,
5:30.
Lincoln, excuse me, Lincoln, that's reactionary. That's not preventative. Now,
Oh, my God.
And they do. It's 5:30. Listen, there's no reason with all the concentrated wealth that we have in this region, in this city, while our after-school programs cannot be properly funded, while our community learning center programs cannot be properly funded, while if kids want to participate in after-school programs, including sports and extracurriculars, they should be able to do so free of charge. There's a lot of things that we can be doing that we're not doing because we talk a good game, but we don't put our money where our mouth is. Put some money behind it. This
So have
whole
you
conversation
studied,
is about money.
Nathan, you've studied the Cincinnati budget, and you can tell us specifically how much more money the recreation department needs to keep these kids from committing crimes. I mean, have you studied it? You actually know a specific number? You looked at the
And they
numbers?
do have
Yeah, I mean, I spent
programs now. They have after school programs.
They're not
Yeah.
properly funded. They are not properly funded. So yeah, I spent, just full disclosure here, I spent 5 years at the after school program director working with the YMCA in a Cincinnati public school. I did it. I saw it firsthand. I was touching people on a regular basis, and I know the money runs out. And every single year we have an election year, and there's so many issues we talk about, but after school program, community learning center programs never comes up. It never comes up. I know right now that the CRC budget is about 30 million. I know that per year. And I know we spend 180 million per year for police. So, I mean, this is part of the reason why people were talking about reimagining police. Not that we don't need police, but it's really reimagining the police budget. Like, hey, there's other things that maybe could have an impact on what we see in our streets, but we're not properly funding it. And that comes back on the taxpayers, because we rather put our money in stadiums. We rather put our money in recreational venues than invest it in our babies.
But I think that I even think that goes beyond the public sector there, Nathan. I think like part of that conversation is where is the private sector and where is our business community and I'm not saying that there aren't people in the business community in Cincinnati who aren't doing some great things.
Oh, there's a lot of good people
around this city for kids, but it can't all just be public dollars, tax dollars. Again, literally, it takes the village to do this. So we need our nonprofit sector. We need our public sectors. We need our private sectors and business communities to all be putting in dollars to help do some of the things that you say. I agree with poverty being the problem that it is in Cincinnati. You do need to have things where kids can get free access to things. I totally and completely agree with what you're saying. I guess, my whole point to the piece is that it's not that anything that anybody on here is talking about isn't a piece of the puzzle. It's just my view is that the most important piece to the puzzle starts at home. And that's where, I don't
we already know
enough
that
engagement.
We already know
Nathan,
that.
My argument is we need to see more engagement and investment there.
And
But how do you
that's
gauge
money.
that?
That's money. You talk.
Like, how do you that? It comes back to money.
Yeah.
This is a money problem, and
Yeah.
money is gonna solve it. That's what it is. That's what it's always been. Like, how did we get here? Metro ran out of money for the services, right? Why didn't CPS do their own bus service? They don't have the money. What did Fiji say? I spent $400,000. What is CPS saying? We don't have the money and resources. It's a money issue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that that's not part of the equation. I mean, you can't get around. You know, everything costs something.
It does.
To your point, it's a matter of where are you going to spend that money and where are you going to make the investment. I would rather spend money on helping parents create healthier homes than I would creating another bus route.
Oh, absolutely. But, you know, to your point, I got to make this point because I work side by side with all kinds of people in this city, man. You got people in the private sector that are working in our schools and our after school programs on a regular basis, and they don't do it for attention. They'll never put it out there in the media, and they're just kind of unsung heroes. So I don't want to make it seem like there aren't good, concerned private citizens that aren't doing work. What I'm saying is, as taxpayers, we got to put our money where our mouth is, because when something goes wrong, and when a little black kid or a bunch of little black kids scare you off for Government Square, it's the public that's going to make a big deal about it. So then we got to put our money where our mouth is to make sure we're trying to deal with it before it becomes an issue.
But again, I think that gets back to creating healthier spaces, because I think taxpayers already are putting their money out there. The question is how are the people who are getting our money spending our money? I mean, I think you said it yourself. And these are the arguments that we have. You know, should our tax dollars go to stadiums and arenas and things of that nature, millions of dollars here and there to support those things, or should our tax dollars go to the types of things that you're talking about? We're already, you know, taxpayers are already putting their money on the table and continue to put more as taxes go up. They're doing their part. The question is that are the gatekeepers, the people who have their hands on the coffers, how are they spending? Are they spending wisely what they're already getting? And it's tough to tell somebody when you're looking at that person and they feel like they're wasting your money already. No, I'm not going to give it. I'm not going to give more because you're not spending wisely what I'm already giving to you.
Well, you know, when I was on Cincinnati City Council in the way back, which only probably Lincoln here will remember, I did two things that I'm kind of proud of. One is I passed or led the effort for the teen curfew. Okay. And what we did is it basically got these kids off the streets and put them in recreation centers so they could get picked up, whatever. It wasn't locking them up as such. And I'll tell you something. I was attacked when I proposed this as racist and blah, blah, blah. By God's grace, the Baptist Ministers Conference agreed to support it, which is how we got it passed 5-4 for a temporary program. It was so welcomed and successful and liked by the city, people in the city. When we made it permanent, it was a 9-0 vote. Okay, that was, we call it reactionary, but it was effective. Another program, again, I'm not trying to boast, pat myself. I started something called Citizens on Patrol. Lincoln, you probably remember that too. Started in Madisonville, and it was just citizens working with the police, and I think it's now spread to almost every neighborhood. Now, to me, those are measures that helped reduce crime. I'm sorry, they weren't root causes. They didn't deal with the ultimate problem of poverty and parental supervision, but they were practical measures that reduce crime. And if I was back on city council, I'd have the same attitude. I'm not going to try and solve the deep problems of the world. I want to provide some immediate support and help for the city. And those are examples of things that did it.
Good examples, but why not do both?
Well, we say, why not do both? I mean, because usually attacking what I'm saying about those two things those were practical, doable things. And yes, there was some money involved, funded, as you would say, Nathan. Yes. I guess what I'm saying about the quote root causes is it's like there's never any real specific proposal. It's just too big a thing. Okay. That the city of Cincinnati to solve poverty, for example, which obviously is a root cause of some of these things. They're not going to do it. They're just not going to do it.
So we're just talking. So Phil, here's an extension of what. So let's go down this law enforcement path, if that's you believe in that as a corrective thing. So I kind of alluded to this in the piece. So we'd rather arrest the kids and take them to jail than to say to a parent, Okay, if you want to say that, then let's put the parent under the heat lamp, and hold you a little bit more accountable.
Yeah.
That
here's the
They're
problem.
already under a heat lamp.
That may be one way to get somebody's attention.
So are you proposing some new statute or something?
You do have the ability to lock up the kids. You can do that. It's practical. It's doable. I have yet, and again, you know how much I respect you. I have yet to hear from you. Not sure you're saying work with the parents specifically. What are you talking about? How are you going to change specifically the behavior of thousands of parents who are neglecting their roles as parents?
So don't we have?
You're not going to change that.
Don't we have laws that if a kid is truant, that a parent can be ordered to court for the truancy of their?
That's a law enforcement. Yeah, I support. That's a law enforcement specific law enforcement thing you can do that I agree with for sure. That's a
why can't we extend that by extension if any other actions that kids take that run afoul of the law that parents have to be that parents
you can because it's provable. You can put evidence in court that the kid was truant. What are you going to do? Are you going to make it a crime to be a bad parent? What is the specific thing you're going to do?
So let's just say your curfew issue, for example. Okay, if a child, because I think that goes direct. That's a direct example of what I'm talking about parenting. If you have children who are out on the streets after a particular time, that says to me that a parent has no clue. Like if I was outside of my house after like,
what are you going to do about it?
What do you do when a kid is truant?
Well,
the kid is charged with a crime of truancy. It's a minor crime, and the parent, you're right, is charged. That's a specific action. But
right. So why couldn't you say the same thing with the curfew violation?
Well,
if a kid is out past the curfew, why couldn't a parent be held accountable for that?
And Phil, you made it seem like the whole city was behind this curfew. City council may have voted for it, but as I can recall, people were against it because kids were roaming around in Hyde Park and places like that,
right.
And no problem. And so people had issues with that curfew.
Well, with all Lincoln, I'll just refer you back. It was originally, because I had to fight for it, it was passed 5-4 as a temporary measure, and then it went through 9-0 permanently. And I tell you the reason it went through, because the people in not just Hyde Park, most of the problems were actually more in the kind of west side areas, not in the higher end areas. People
that's what I know.
That curfew.
They never even.
They love the curfew, or else
Cincinnati, in Hyde Park,
Dwight Tillery, Tyrone Yates, and the rest of Todd Fortuny, they would never have supported that because they were against it from the beginning, maybe because I started, but they were against it. But once they saw the public reaction, they all voted for it.
I have to go back and check the history on it, but back to the point you were making, Kevin, about your piece is, that kind of stuck out to me too, where you were like, put more public heat on the parents. And I'm like, these parents are already responsible for their children if they're minors. They're already responsible.
So what's the accountability though there? Like, how are they being made to pay consequences for those things? And again,
we may never know because we're not in the household.
No, I'm talking about through the system. Like, we have no problem. What I'm saying is, if you have no problem with police and the court system throwing the book at the kid for violating something in some way, shape, or form, if it is something that is provable where there is negligence or a lack of oversight by a parent, why would they not also be held accountable in that same instance? So again, using the truancy, if a kid is truant from school, they're coming after the parent. If a kid is out after curfew, why are they not coming out after the parent? If a child commits a crime after curfew hours or things that are provable, why would a parent not be held responsible for that or held accountable for not knowing where their child is?
I remember being a teenager and I told my parents that I was going to spend the night at my friend's house, my male friend's house. I was at a girl's house.
You know what, Nathan?
Yeah, but if you got arrested,
Nathan, let me tell you a story.
I was at a girl's house. They had no idea where I was.
Let me tell you a story real quick, Nathan. Let me tell you a story real quick. You know what? I did that same thing. You know what happened? My mom called over there and found out I wasn't where I was supposed to be. See, that's the type of parenting that
You
I'm
weren't slick
talking
with
about.
it.
Well,
My
what I
mama
wanna know,
did
what
that.
was
My
her
mama
parent?
knew her. My
She
mama
was
knew
over
her
there.
son.
What was her parent?
My mama knew her son, and she did not take my word without her checking it out.
What was the girl's
I'm not
parent?
sure what the point is.
What the point is, parenting. That's what I'm saying. Like my mom did not. If I said, "Hey, mom, I'm going," so she checked on it.
Yeah.
She knew who my
They don't
friends
check up
were.
on the kids. They don't.
You
They
weren't
don't.
slick
And
with it.
she
Talk to
laid
them in
down
the
the
morning.
law. You better be where you say you gonna
You
be.
wasn't
They
slick
talk
with
to
it,
the
Kevin.
kids in the morning when they leave
Okay,
the
but
house.
hey,
Kevin, I got a Maya
Talk to
call.
them in the
What
morning.
you call? I got a Maya
It
call.
ain't a matter of being slick. I live with the police. I live with
No.
the police.
So did I, but I was slick with it. Like I had my boy.
Well, I
He
just
already
want
knew
to
what
say
the play
real quick,
was.
I apologize. I want to apologize to my friend Kevin Aldridge. Now that I see you're talking about specific law enforcement, which is what it is, holding them accountable. I'm 100% for that. Forgive me if I said anything bad about your article. I thought you were talking about some social work stuff. I'm
That's all
100%
it
with
took.
you now.
Nathan, I
That's
just
all
have
it took.
one
Get
question.
tough on crime.
Nathan, I just have one question. Where was the girl's parents whose house you were at?
I think
Uh
I don't
Again,
remember. I think they
Are
were
the names
away or
going to be
something.
changed? Are the names going to be
Making
changed
my
to protect
point.
the innocent?
Either they were
I'm
away
serious.
or I slipped
That's
into.
not good parenting then.
No, I remember now. Her parents were there, but I slipped into a window, and she had a multi-level house.
Oh,
Believe me,
geez.
the things you do as a teenager to hook up is you go to great lengths. But her parents were there, so I had it. You wasn't slick, Kevin. You had to be slick with it. Like my
I
boy,
guess I wasn't.
my boy's mother was away, so I had him answer the phone, and he had a little story together. We had the whole plan down, so I had to make sure I didn't get caught. You know what I'm saying? Had to make sure I didn't get caught. Yeah, this is so let's take it to what we see here on Government Square. So what's happening on Government Square is young folks are getting off of the bus, they're going to Government Square, and then unruliness is happening. If you're a parent, you don't know. You think your child's on the way home. They might tell you, I'm gonna stop at the store, stop at a buddy's house. You have no idea that they're down the square creating chaos. You have no idea.
Well, if they get arrested for creating chaos, then the parents will find out.
Then they will find out.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole point.
And
That's
then the
why I
parents are
think
going
I
to be
agree with Kevin.
responsible. We act
Huh?
like having a kid, a teenager that gets in trouble is not a burden on a parent. You got to go to court. You might have to get a lawyer. You got to lose time on your job. You got to
Yeah.
go back and forth, pay
It
for
should be a
parking. I
burden.
mean,
It should be.
parents are responsible for their children, generally speaking.
I
Well,
think
this is
Nathan,
making them
that's true for-
responsible, which I agree with.
Yeah. So here's an example. And this I know I'm not speaking out of school because I was told by people who were there. One of the young men who was involved in one of the assaults down on Government Square got arrested. Went through that whatever legal process that was either out the next day or the day before and was back down there again, engaging in disruptive behavior. Okay. Now that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Like there's clearly an absence of parenting there. Now you're speaking at it from the standpoint of someone who is a responsible parent with their kids, and your kids, I'm sure if they did something, you would be there. You're looking at it through the lens of a responsible parent, right?
No, I'm not.
And these are the folks. These are not the folks that I'm talking about. And I said very specifically, I'm not talking about all parents. I'm talking about the parents specifically of the unruly teens, because let's just face it, every kid that's down at Government Square or whatever transit center is not causing a problem. Some of them are just hanging out, kicking it, whether we can like that or not, or agree that that's a good thing. Hey, it's America. They're allowed to be there. I'm talking about those who are disruptive there and the parents who are absent. And these are people who are there repeatedly over and over and over again. To me, we just got to quit making excuses for that type of parenting. And if there are some serious issues in the household there, that's where I'm saying, let's figure out, is this a parent who's really struggling and needs some help? Or is this an absentee parent who just don't give a damn? Right. And I think what we don't want to have the conversation about is There are too many. I'm not going to put a number on it because I don't know how many. And you're right, I don't know the situation. But what I can tell from what I see is that clearly there are some parents out there who don't give a damn.
Well, I'm back to
I think you're
disagreeing
wrong.
with Kevin if I could.
Okay.
Because
All right,
when I
Nathan.
was
Well, every parent is a responsible parent, and they're doing everything they can, and these kids is just
That's not what I'm saying.
off the chain. Like, well, but
That's not what I'm saying.
but
Here's
you
where I
have to
think you're wrong.
acknowledge what some of what I'm saying is correct. Again, I'm not talking about all parents.
Here's
But I'm
where
saying
I think
you
you're
got some
wrong.
parents who don't give a damn. That's
Here's
true.
where I think
That's
you're wrong.
facts.
Here's where I think you're wrong. I think you're wrong when you make the point that that parents don't care about their kids based upon what the kids do. That's like saying that CPS don't care about children graduating because so many kids don't graduate from CPS. It's just not fair. So I'm not looking at through a lens of being a good parent. I'm looking at through a lens of realizing there's a lot I don't know. And where I say you're wrong is we are real comfortable with having conversations about parents. We love that conversation. Lincoln will tell you they had that conversation all the time. What we're not comfortable with is the historical context, the missed priorities, not really investing in these children, these parents, segregation, inequality. We ain't comfortable with those conversations. That's why I say you're wrong.
Well,
Hey, but
could
I'm
I
not
just
saying-
respond real quickly to
go
Kevin's
right ahead.
example of the guy who was released the next day? Because I'm back to disagreeing with you, Kevin, no offense. But the fact is, when I was a prosecutor in juvenile court, one of my biggest frustrations was kids would commit a crime, sometimes a violent, and they'd be in 2020, maybe one night, and then they're out. So they had no immediate consequences. If they would keep them in 2020 for a week or two and let the kids feel some immediate negative reinforcement from their actions, that it makes a huge difference. But the problem is they don't do that. They just let them out right away.
Yeah, the only thing I would disagree, and again, I get we can't make blanket statements because every situation is different. But I do know that for some kids, 2020 or whatever incarcerated situation that you're going to put them in is not a deterrent, because for many of them, some of that might be better than the home environment that they're going into. So
my
jail
experience is
might
they
be a
hated
welcome-
2020.
Huh?
They
Say
hated
again?
the guys. Those kids would cry and fight. They hated being locked
All
up.
of them?
Well, everyone in my experience as a juvenile court prosecutor, I never saw one said, "Oh wow, I want to go to 2020."
I'm not saying they
it.
were happy to be there, but what I'm saying is
They were in a
I've
position
seen
to
a
want
lot
to-
I've seen a lot of kids who have been runaways, who have had a lot of issues, and they don't have a problem going back 2, 3, 4 times. That says to me, Phil, they may not like it, but it's better than where they at. Because anybody else with common sense, I mean, you got to just think about this stuff rationally, fellas. I'm just saying, like, who wants to go in and out of a situation like that unless where you coming from ain't really no better? I mean, that there's a certain part to this argument that, you know, we just got to use some logic and common sense here and say this stuff is not adding up, right? It doesn't make sense unless we say that there's something missing in these home environments that's creating this type of situation where kids would rather be anywhere else but at home.
Yeah, I mean, I would not argue against that. All I'm saying is painting with a broad brush and generalizing, I just think it's wrong. And just because a kid is out here acting up does not mean mom and dad or grandma is like, okay. We all saw Menace to Society. We all know these grandparents didn't know what he was doing in them streets. It happens every single day. That's the only point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good stuff, everybody. I appreciate it. We had a good, robust conversation. To all the folks out there watching this, please like and share it. Share it as we grow this podcast. It means everything. We've got a YouTube channel. We really want to push people to subscribe and find us there. And to everybody on the crew, I really appreciate you and thank you for your time.
No problem.
Hey, Nathan,
Thanks.
before we go, can we just give Lincoln some love, man? I mean, look, I have so much respect. I mean, look, let's be real. Lincoln is the legend. He's the man. I mean, he has. I love Lincoln. I got so much respect for him, and to have him on the crew this week.
Hey,
quite the honor.
I enjoyed it. I like
Yeah.
this. I have to come back again sometime.
Oh, you know I'm gonna be
Let me
asking.
give him some love. Lincoln is a legend in his own time. I've been described as a legend in my own mind. So that's how I defer to him.
But you know what? I've told Lincoln straight to his face the same thing. You know, you always know where you stand with me. So yeah, I got nothing but love and respect for Lincoln, and I don't want you to go nowhere, bro. As I've told you before, like I like you right where you are, and it starts my day off the right way. So,
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you all.
yep. Have a great day, everybody, and we'll be
right.
back on Friday with a new crew and more hot topics.